Doesn't I'll just go on.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Cool. Hey, YouTube.
Hi, YouTube.
What's up, YouTube? You guys are always here first.
They
Dig
get
it.
special content.
Okay, okay.
All right, ready?
Yeah.
The codes of self esteem. It's the codes of who you are. Are you ready?
What's good, Primos? Happy Thursday. It's your girl, Jules, and welcome to another episode of Primos Chidos. And of course, I am here with my co host, the boy, Brandon,
Hello, everybody.
and the little bro, Steve.
Hey, what's up, everyone? How you guys doing? And today is a very special episode because we actually have a guest. Joining us today is. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
What's up, man? What's up, guys? This is Danny, and I'm with Said Connects.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So, for those of you who don't know, he's the newest show on our lineup for TJ and Latinx, brightening up our family, getting a little bit larger. So, why don't you go ahead and tell our audience what your show's going to be about and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So the show's gonna be about cannabis. Said Connect stands for Cannabis Entrepreneurial Dialogues, and so the purpose of that is to be able to speak about people of color that are in the cannabis industry or brands of color that are in the cannabis industry to be able to share and educate our communities through their stories and experiences. So we'll be bringing in a lot of guests um, from the community, from the culture, um, and just anyone and everyone that's interested in learning about it. We want them on our show.
So, how did you get into that, and how long have you been like into that kind of industry?
With the show or the industry in general?
The industry in general.
So the industry in general, I've been working with them for about I want to say 5 or 6 years now.
Wow,
About 5 years, yeah. And started through food.
really?
Yeah, yeah. So started with food. My partner Julia, shout out to Julia. She's probably watching right now. So she used to do a lot of catering gigs.
Mhm.
And so she got me into them. And she was doing some catering gigs for a cannabis chef who would have dinners, private dinners for her clients, and so we would come out and help serve the plates that she's creating. It's about 3 or 4 course meals, and they're like regular meals. Like you would never think that they were infused.
Wow.
Right? There are times where she'll serve like pork or duck or whatever,
Mhm.
um, and we're out there and we're serving, everyone there individually and kind of just keeping tabs on them, making sure that they're not getting too elevated or too high. And
Oh
if we do
wow.
see that, then we'll, try to bring it down. And so that's how I got started into it. Um, and so then the chef, she also then created said. So she created said because at the time this was pre-legalization going on, and she she noticed that there's a lot of education that needs to be done, and she wanted to create like the TED Talk of cannabis in a sense.
Mhm.
And so that was the birth of said. So she would create private events, and workshops similar to a TED Talk, right, and invite folks that are in the industry to come up on stage and speak about what they're working and how are they, what are they doing, what are their plans, and it kind of grew from there, right? And um, from that, she got big. The chef got big. She opened up a restaurant, and so when she opened up the first restaurant here in West Hollywood, um, she couldn't really take on set, right? And so she was like, "Listen, like you guys are my day ones, and so you can take it, like run with it, because I know you guys are really passionate about this work." And we were like, "All right, cool." This was right. This was in 2019 when she gave it to us, right before the pandemic. And so we're planning an event and we're like, cool, we're going to, we can find a venue and we're going to find presenters to come out. And when the pandemic hit, that changed everything, right? Like we couldn't do anything, everything shut down. And so I spent like our time thinking like, how the fuck are we gonna continue this if we don't even know when we're gonna open back
Mhm.
up? And so then I had the bright idea of like, well, let me try a podcast. Like, how, how hard could it be? Because I'm thinking like, we gotta find a venue. We have to find 4 to 5 presenters. We got to try to fill up the stage, fill up the location. So I'm thinking like, oh, that's easy. Like one presenter is easy to find. I didn't realize that with podcasting, like then you got to figure out like audio and you got to do all this other shit that comes with it. And so it took a while for me to like gather all of that information and really put myself out there in this situation because I've never done radio. I've never done podcasting. It was just an idea, and I kind of just ran with it, and it just started like wildfire after that. I got into Clubhouse. I don't know if you guys heard about
Yeah, yeah.
Clubhouse. So I
Mhm.
got into Clubhouse, and that's how I got to meet a lot of other folks,
Mhm.
and it opened up the doors to be able to even interview people outside of just LA. Because by doing those events, we were pigeonholing ourselves by only having folks in LA, right? And with going virtual, and the pandemic showed us that we can do a lot of Zoom and all of that.
Mhm.
I was able to interview like folks in Brooklyn, New York, or folks in Detroit, Michigan, um, to speak on like what's going on around the country. So that's kind of how it all got started.
Oh.
Do you feel like you've always kind of had, because I think back, like a lot of people who like weed, they're kind of more of just consumers. They're just like, oh, I just like using it. Has it always been for you like something where you're like, no, like I always want to do something more with weed. Like I want to work with cannabis. I want to learn about it. Or when was that transition of like you're like, weed is more to me than just something that I want to smoke or consume?
Um, it happened around what 20. My daughter's 3. It happened about a little before 3 years ago. Um, I before working in cannabis, I was working in education. I've worked in education like since since I graduated high school, really in 2003. Welcome old.
Really? Really? You graduated high school in 2003? You don't look that old, man.
Yeah.
It must be the weed.
Right. Yeah, so I was working in education from like after school programs, and then from there I transitioned to Head Starts and working with the babies from 0 to 5, and then working through childcare. Um, and I ended up losing my job in childcare because of contracts and whatnot, nonprofit and all that, right? So, I'm trying to find anything, and that was around the time that I found the catering gig, and through the catering gig, they needed to get their flour from somewhere,
Mhm.
right, to be able to infuse the meals. And at the time, one of the companies was just starting to blow up. They were just starting to get big, and they were starting to hire people. And so I got on working with that particular brand as a driver and delivering to different dispensaries. And so once I got into that, and then I started learning about the licenses, and then I started learning, I was like hustling. Like, I had a baby. Like, I had a baby on the way. I already have a 12-year-old now. Now she's 12. At the time, she was like 9 or 10. Um, so like, and everyone else that was in there, they're like kids. They're like 21,
Mm,
22,
yeah.
25, right? So I'm in there and I'm hustling. Like I'm trying to get all the hours that I can. And that's when like I started to move up in like management, and that's when I started to learn like this isn't just about smoking. Like there's so much more, right? There's supply chain, there's you know running a business, there's distribution, manufacturing, there's all these different components that go along with this business. And as legalization continues and more licenses start to open up, like there's so much to unpack there, and that's what caught me. So combining all of like my previous educational pieces of like educating people and providing workshops, and now understanding this chain and understanding that not a lot of people know about this, it kind of just now merged itself to where like
Mm.
it came together in a way, because I'm already about educating, I'm already about providing, that that's what this is providing now.
But was it? Oh, I'm sorry. Were you gonna say something?
I was gonna say, tell me a little bit about that catering gig. So like people would just order cannabis infused food and like just eat it and get high, and that's or just have a good time on.
Yeah. So they would like, um, yeah, they would just come out and order, like celebrate birthday parties.
Wow.
Like there was one client that I think she was celebrating like her 40th or 50th birthday party, and they came from like out of state. And
Mm,
they were like, instead of doing like this big ass party, like I just wanted to have this dinner, and they invited like their closest friends. But yeah, it was just they're just it's not like your typical edible that like you
mhm,
you
Mm-hmm.
you find like you'll get like the brownies or nothing.
mhm,
They're low dosage meals.
mm,
So each meal would maybe have anywhere between 2 to 4 to 5 milligrams
mhm,
in the meal.
mhm,
Because you think about it, like if we're serving 3 to 4 meals, we're not gonna load it up with a bunch of
Mm.
Yeah.
milligrams. Like the body itself doesn't even need that much.
mhm,
You only need, if especially if you don't smoke,
mm,
you only need five.
Okay.
5 milligrams for someone that doesn't consume is already a lot,
Yeah.
and people don't know that or understand that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I took my first ever edible a couple years ago. It was a 5 one, and I swear, compared to now, I felt like a 50 milligram one because it had me off of my rocks, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, me too. Me
Was
too.
it? Well, I was wondering, like, in terms of the cannabis industry, you working in there, especially because you said you have a daughter and everything. Was it hard at first? Because I know, like, there is that stigma of kind of like, oh, you're working with cannabis. I mean, I know if I got a job being like a bud tender, I know my mom would freak out. You know,
Mhm.
traditional Mexican mom. She'd
Yeah,
be
for
like,
sure.
how was that?
Um, with my kids, like they didn't really know at the time. Like things just go over their head.
Mhm.
So um, it was never really a conversation. It's been more of a conversation more now. Like now that she's a little older, she's in middle school. Um, and so we have I don't have I have those conversations. I have all those open conversations with her. But with my family, my grandparents were tripping out on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, my grandparents tripped. They were like, "What? Why? He's like, isn't that dangerous?" And I'm
Mhm.
like,
mhm,
Yeah, in a way,
Yeah.
but like, well, not really. When at the time, like, the most dangerous part about it is the fact that because it's still federally illegal,
Mhm.
banks don't really touch the business, right? It's hard for banks to touch
Okay.
it, so there's still a lot of cash that's involved, right? And so a lot of payments are being done in cash, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm sure you guys been to dispensaries, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a
Mhm.
lot of them will say like it's cash only,
Yeah.
right? So when they're purchasing from brands, how do you think they're paying for that product? By cash, right? And so as a business or as a brand, you you're picking up cash payments, and sometimes those cash payments can be large sums, right? So I think that like that's part of the one of the biggest dangers of the business is that part, is the cash transaction and having so much cash on hand at
Mhm.
any particular time.
Wow.
And like, what are you kind of hoping to address in your podcast? Like, what specific stigmas, issues are you like really trying to go after?
Any of them, right? Any negative stigma, and just trying to retrain like society, especially within our community, right? Especially within the Latin community. There's so many negative stigmas behind it. Yet there's if you look at it, like if you talk to our grandmas about it, like they would have the nug and the alcohol, right?
Mhm.
I think one of you guys had mentioned it in the
Yeah.
Yeah.
past,
Yeah.
right?
Our parents.
And so like it's there, we know about it, but it's
Mhm.
just hush about it, right? And so just being more open about having these conversations will start to change it. And also, like I'm trying it with even with my children, right? Having these conversations with my children, normalize those conversations with my children so that when they grow up, like it's normal to them. It's an easier like transition for them. And so we're setting up the next generation of like, what's wrong with it? There's really nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a bit of a toxic community in terms of when it comes to weed? And what I mean by that is, have you ever heard that saying of like you can't be addicted to weed? Have you ever heard of that saying?
Yeah, I've heard that you can't be addicted to it, or
I just mean like, what do you think about that type of mindset of like I can smoke every day, all day, as much as I want because you just can't be addicted to weed? What do you think about that one?
um, I mean, it you there's some people that need it, right? Like
Mhm.
medically, they need it,
Mhm.
right? So therefore, like I guess you can see that addiction piece to it, but I don't really hear that too much. I hear more of like if you smoke, like you're just laid on the couch or you're just a vago, right? Like you're not doing that. Like I hear more of that versus like the addiction part.
Mhm.
I think kind of jumping off that, or like, I guess not really to rephrase the question, is I wanted to ask is, what do you think about the, not stigma, but there's like a, in my opinion, there's like a belief or community that there's absolutely zero negative consequences or side effects to weed. And I don't believe that. I don't think weed's bad, but I think nothing in this world is without its consequence.
Yeah.
So that's sort of my question to you is like, are you going to try to tackle that and address some of the unveil some of the problems that weed has, like everything else, so
Yeah,
that
for
it's
sure.
even more
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely want to be able to bring that up, and
Mhm.
definitely want to bring guests that has had the negative side effects because there are, and I've spoken to a few people that either has had some type of negative reaction to it, as good as much as they feel like it's still good, and like I know that it's good,
Mhm.
but they still have some negative reactions to it. I definitely want to bring both sides of that coin and have both sides of those conversations. I want to have people that are against it, and I want to hear what their points of views are and why they feel so against it. I'm not going to bring them in here to try to change their mind. Just I just want to hear their side of the story, right? And hear it and provide that to our listeners so that everyone can kind of see both sides of things. So I definitely want to bring that in. Um, yeah.
That's
That's
cool.
good.
And what do you think about like, what do you think the stigma or the negative aspects of, how the Latin community views, or a lot of communities in general view weed, kind of started? Like, where do you think that kind of started? This is like the bad stuff about weed, the bad sayings about weed.
Media, government, the
Mm.
war on drugs back in the 70s and 80s, right? Like the Say No to Drugs, the DARE program, um, all of that, had that. Even now, like you could even see it now, like with on Netflix, right? If you watch the Narcos Mexico version, it's about weed, right? A lot of it is about smoking and selling weed, and that has that negative connotation with the cartels and all of that. So that it's still out there.
What's the? I'm just asking as a personal question because
Yeah,
I've never been to Mexico and I don't really know like what the
me
attitudes
neither.
are on there. Oh well, I don't know.
I've never been
Um,
to TJ.
well, I was just gonna ask. Like, I know a lot of people say that where weed kind of, or a lot of drugs kind of got their negative stigma was was it Reagan or Nixon
Yeah,
that did
Reagan.
it?
Yeah.
Reagan.
Uh, does that carry over to other countries? Do other countries kind of have that shared stigma, or is it kind of more
No.
relaxed
That
in
was
other?
that's just in the states. Every
Mm.
other country is just based off of like the cartels
So
and the gangs.
Mexico's problem with weed is more because of the cartels. It's
For
not.
sure. Yeah.
Interesting.
Wow, really? I didn't even know that. That's crazy.
At least I would think so. Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah. Of course, it makes sense.
So I kind of want to know a little bit more about you. So
Yeah. Shoot.
I see that you're wearing a Giants hat. So are you from the Bay Area?
No, I'm not from the Bay Area. Um,
You just hate
He-
you just hate LA and hate the Dodgers, right?
no, I I was born here in LA. I was actually born right here on down the street at the Kaiser right here.
Wow.
I was actually born there.
That's cool.
Full
Also-
circle, full
yeah,
circle. He's
yeah,
back.
I'm
He's
back.
back.
Growing up as a kid, I grew up in the South Bay, like Inglewood, Lenox,
Okay.
Hawthorne area. Um, and then we also moved to Miami for a bit. So I was
Really?
also in Miami for a while. And every summer we'd have to fly back to spend time with our dad. And so that's where we spent most of our time at Lenox every summer. Um, but when my family moved from El Salvador back in the 80s, they
Oh,
lived in San Francisco for a while.
wow.
And from there, they kind of just grew to the city and with everything that came with it.
Mhm.
And I kind of just followed suit on like I looked up to my uncles and they were
Mhm.
like big 49er fans and big Giants fans. And
Okay.
so I kind of was like, all right, cool, I'm gonna be a fan too.
So that's where it comes from.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Now I see why you're wearing the Giants hat.
There you go.
I had a question. Me and Steve were talking about this, and it's not a huge question, but maybe because you've seen maybe this is your area of expertise. Um, how come in joints they don't use the same filters that cigarettes use? Why is it like a rolled piece of paper? Like how come it's not like the sponginess?
So, and I only know this because we were trying to with the company that I was working with, we were trying to develop like
They were in the
that.
lab
Yeah,
testing
no, for
things.
sure.
Yeah.
We even had Marlboro like come in and like they were like kind of walking us through it. Yeah,
Really?
straight up.
Really?
Um, it it's because of like the machinery that they had, right? And so a lot of it still is hand rolled. A lot of the
Mhm.
joints are still hand rolled. Like there's some machines that are out there to make the automated process a little
Mhm.
easier,
Mhm.
but and we bought like the company bought like this big ass fucking machine
Mhm.
that was made for cigarettes. But with the filter, like it just didn't work out, like because of the paper that's required.
Mhm.
Because the paper is different too from the cigarettes
Yeah.
to
Mm.
the
It's a
joints,
lot
right?
thinner.
Yeah, so it's a lot thinner, and so we just found there's just a lot of problems with it to manufacture. And it was easier to just do the rolled paper or the coiled
Really?
paper on the manufacturing side of things. I'm sure there's people out there that's gonna develop it and put
Mhm.
it together, but the way in the stages that it's at right now, it's just easier to manufacture the way it is right now. And even with that machine, it was just so hard to like put in different strains because when you with that machine, like with the tobacco, like you just put in tobacco and it'll fill it.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter. There's no different really types of tobacco that you're filling in. When we were doing the joints, we're mixing it with if we wanted to do let's say an indica dominant strain, we're putting in three different like maybe two to three different indica flowers blended together into this machine. And then if we wanted then to the next batch was going to be a sativa, right? We're putting it like we would have to clean out the entire
Yeah.
system to make sure that there isn't any indica
Like
strains
residue.
or
Yeah.
residue left in that
Mhm.
machine
Yeah.
when we're putting in the sativa, because then it's not going to be a sativa joint,
Mhm.
Mhm.
right? It becomes a hybrid joint at that point, and
Yeah.
that's not what we want to manufacture. So
Mhm.
there's like those small little things that
That add
came
up.
into the manufacturing
Mm.
piece that made it difficult.
That's
That's
funny.
that's
It
interesting.
makes me think talking about being in the lab, where do you think the cannabis industry will be in about like 20 years? Because me and Brandon used to always say like I'd love if one day like you go to your local liquor store and like buy like a pack of joints and then just like go
Yeah,
home.
like adding on to that question, it's funny that you brought up marble because I remember being not like a kid, but in high school thinking that like I'm assuming that the big tobacco companies are gonna take over like the weed industry. Like I was surprised, or maybe this is the case that Marlboro hadn't come out with like a weed like pack that you can buy anywhere. How come
They're
that's
just
not the
waiting.
case? They're waiting on it.
They're just waiting. Right now, there's so many laws in place that like it, it's all fucked up right now in a sense, right? Like with the amount of licenses that are out per state, like in order to be legally selling weed, like you need to have a license.
Mhm.
Right? You need to own a license. And when they first rolled out the program, they didn't roll it out for anyone and everyone, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
they rolled it out for the folks that have the capital, and depending on and different every state is different on the laws that they've placed in for you to be able to obtain a license, right? So right now they opened it up to just a certain few and a certain amount of licenses. um, then a lot of pushback happened and a lot of conversations with Congress and protesting and fighting to be able to give to communities to the communities that were affected by the war on drugs, right? Everyone that was arrested for it, like because you see, there's still people that are locked up
Mhm.
for like weed
Yeah, yeah.
offenses. Yet we got
Businesses.
other big ass businesses making millions off of it,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So there's still a lot that needs to be worked out. Um, but once it's opened up, like and those floodgates open, for sure, for sure, those big companies are waiting to come
So,
in. Like just like and you see it with like the CBD waters out there now, right? And or with the
Mm.
seltzers, right?
Mhm.
Like Bud Light and all those beer companies jumped on that shit real quick when they saw
Yeah.
that White Claw was like booming and doing big things. Like
Mhm.
they jumped on that shit real quick. They're waiting on it too, like just for with infused drinks. So
Mm.
like all these big companies are just kind of just like waiting to pounce.
so really, the big like, uh, the big block right now is that it's not federally legal, and there's no uniform
Exactly.
agreement on like the legalization of it.
Yep.
So
Every
it's
state is different. Even every and even like within the state, then it comes down to local. Like what's the local laws, right? Because not every law, not every like, although it's legal in California, there's some counties and there's some cities that are banned from, like they've banned having any businesses or allow for consumption. That's why you don't see dispensaries in every city you go to because of that. There's some laws that are out there that don't allow you to.
Wow.
how long until you think we're federally legal? And what do you think, like, because I feel like it's eventually going to happen, but what do you think the consequences are going to be of that? Like, obviously, we just talked about how there's probably going to be a huge corporations that form out of that. What do you think are the good and bad of that once it's federally legal that comes out of that?
So to answer the first question, I still think it's about 10 to 15 years.
Really?
Really?
Yeah, it is
No.
still a
Because
long way.
because people keep saying that in Joe Biden's presidency, people
Yeah.
predict that it's gonna happen.
Because I've
But it's
heard
not
that
gonna happen.
his ratings are gonna go down. That's what he's gonna do to like bump it up. I always thought it would be this president or the next was gonna do it. But really, why do you think 15 years?
Because they still can't figure shit out
Mm,
with everything. Like there's still a lot of things that aren't working right now. People, you know, there's still companies out that aren't allowing for like the social. It's called social equity. That like the
mhm.
social equity licenses, that there's different requirements for you to be able to obtain. Um, there's still a lot that needs to be done on that end and figure out who can apply for these licenses, who can do what. That I think once all that shit's figured out, it'll work. But you, it's still a while
So right now, there's just too many like intricacies for it to
for
like
sure.
universally kind of say, all right, it's all legal now. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, if you look at like even if you look at like the state of Florida, for
mm,
example, they're medically legal, right? But within that entire state, I was just in a meeting like last week. I think they said that in that entire state, there's about 80, 80 licenses out for the entire state. And of those 80 licenses, it's owned by 8 companies.
wow.
Wow.
So those 8 companies are making billions of dollars off of
Mhm.
it. And they haven't even had like people are fighting to even have a conversation about opening up more licenses for
Mm,
the low communities
mm.
and for the folks that have been affected by the war on drugs or have been incarcerated, whatever the case is.
That's interesting.
And so every state is different.
So
Yeah.
from my understanding, the way it's kind of working out right now is the communities that would benefit from it aren't being, they're not able to get licenses that easily. And the communities like bigger corporations, they're the ones that are hogging up all the licenses. and profiting off of it. Is that how it kind of works?
Oh, sorry, ask that again.
So like the way it's kind of working is the communities that would benefit from, getting a license and opening a weed shop or something like that. It's next to impossible to get a license because all these bigger corporations are suddenly trying to hog up all
Well,
the
not
license.
just. I mean, it's the state requirements.
Mm,
Like, there's just different things. Like, so here in LA, for the social equity applicants that applied back in 2018, one COVID fucked shit up, right? But in order for you to get the license, they're moving really slow. The state is moving slow to approve licenses, and the requirements are sometimes insane. So for LA, one of the requirements was that you needed to have a location ready to go under your name, even without it even being approved. Like, just to apply, you have to show proof that you have a business. And so people are already losing money on an empty space waiting for
Yep.
the state to approve.
Wow.
And if they didn't,
mm,
and let's say they applied in 2018, they didn't get the approval till 2020. Those 2 years, they still needed to maintain that
Mhm.
that location. And if they lost that location, they can kiss that license application goodbye.
wow.
And so it's little things like that that's going on, where now these individuals have to like try to find investors, and these investors aren't, they're obviously not doing it for the right reasons, right? They're
Mm,
just trying to get money in the door. And so they have these predatory investors out there just preying on individuals that have applied for a license and are still going through the process. And there's still a lot of folks right now that have applied for licenses and are still waiting and are paying for empty lots right now, but they're still just waiting. So there's a lot of that going on. And if you don't have the
wow.
money, you're losing it. Then also there's other folks that will have the license, and that's like Willy Wonka's golden ticket, in a sense, where like once you have that license, you can flip that license and sell it for however many millions to a big company. So there's
Wow.
both
Really?
sides of the coin right there going on.
Yeah.
And then, or you can partner with someone, right? And you can partner with like big companies to try to, because I'm telling you, the license is like gold right now.
Mhm.
You have that license, you can do whatever you want with it, right? If I have the license, and let's say you guys wanted to start your own brand, like you wanted to push your brand, Primos Chidos, flower packages out,
Mm,
right? You
Mhm.
can't just sell it. You can't just go into a dispensary and say,
mhm,
"Hey, you guys want to buy my flower?" You
mhm.
have to go through me, partner with me, to be able to have your products at the dispensary. So
Wow.
that, like you said, there's so much that goes on, and that's a lot of the conversations that we want to have.
I didn't even know that about the licenses. You can sell them?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're owning them and create some type of contract to sell. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And what's your end game? Like, what's your ultimate goal? Is it always just gonna be talking about cannabis, or do you have any visions of like maybe having your own brand, dispensary, anything like that?
Um. Yeah. Eventually, I'd like to have like my own brand, like you know, um, Set Connects flour, right? Have the package, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
So just like every podcast or show that's out there that has their merch, right? They have
Mhm.
T-shirts that you can buy, and
Yeah.
you have whatever. Like, I want to have like Set Connects rolling trays, Set Connects T-shirts, and if I can have a manufacturing license that wants to partner with us and say, yeah, we'll package up your weed, then I can have my listeners be like, yo, go to this dispensary and go pick up Set Connect flower and smoke with us at 420 while you're listening to the show, right? So
Yeah.
that's, yeah, for sure. That's definitely one of the end game.
So
That,
what?
go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say. So what companies that you know in LA that you think we should support, like dispensaries or anything that you know around in LA that
Yeah.
you think we should support?
Yeah, for sure. So you want to look into like the social equity brand. So anytime you step into a shop, ask for like, where's your social equity menu, right? Or brands, because those are gonna be the family owned, or Latino owned,
Mhm.
or black owned, or whatever minority owned brands are going to be your social equity brands. So you definitely want to go in and look for those. I know a few have opened up here in LA. Gorilla RX opened up on Crenshaw. They're
Mhm.
black owned, women owned. One of the first black women owned dispensaries
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
here in LA. Another one's going to be opening up on MLK and Western, which is Josephine and Billy's. Another black owned dispensary here in LA. Um, if you're out in the Bay, you have um, Stizzy, one of the Stizzy shops that's owned by the first Latina dispensary dispensary owner. Um, and there's a few more that's coming up that I've had conversations with a few folks that they're in the works. That's about all I can say regarding that.
Mhm.
But it's
Yeah.
come. There's more Latinas that are gonna be owning pretty soon, and once
Nice.
that happens, we'll definitely be highlighting them. And if you're looking for brands, um, we have some of my sponsors
Mhm.
that are that have their own brands and they're Latino owned. 4Gs, they're
Mhm.
Latino owned brands. A few of them are out here in LA. One of them is at the Gorilla RX. So
That's cool.
if any of your listeners do happen to go to Gorilla RX, make sure to check out 4Gs.
Mhm.
They're a family of it's just husband and wife going, doing it
Wow.
themselves.
Wow.
And so we got them.
I'm gonna check them out.
Yeah, Jesse. I know a good friend of mine, Jesse Alvarez. Uh, she has, she's one of the first Latina manufacturers to own a license.
Hmm.
So she has her own license, manufacturing license and distribution license. So
Cool.
she creates um, oils. Her thing is oils. She
Hmm.
makes oils for different brands. And she'll formulate the drinks and stuff like that. So she has a
Nice.
few things out here as well. So I know the Fizz, one of her drinks, Fuego 415. So yeah, definitely look out for them.
Cool.
Very cool.
So, like I had mentioned earlier, um, kind of thinking more about the future. So, let's say in a world where cannabis has been legalized federally, I'm wondering this is kind of like a philosophical question. Um, is like, do you think that it'll actually affect like our American society in terms of like more and more people are starting to try weed, like, and a lot of people say that like the kind of like what's it called? Not psychedelic, but like the
Psychoactive?
the
Psychosis?
psychoactive, yeah,
Mhm.
the psychoactive like reaction that people get sometimes makes people think about certain things in a different way. Do you think that'll actually affect how people start to think in terms of like politics, any like situations that we have in our society now? Do you think that it'll affect or it'll be more or less the same?
Having a psychoactive effect of smoking, will that affect politics?
Oh
Was that your
no, like
question?
if will it affect like the population of the United States? Like will this now like will be like another great awakening, if you understand what I'm saying?
I guess it depends, but it goes back to the educational piece. I think if we can educate the consumers and educate the communities about the properties, the the properties that the plant has to offer, then yeah, it'll definitely change the mindset and how society views the plant. But it just goes back to education, and there's just that's what we're trying to do, right? That's
Mhm.
exactly what we're trying to do is be able to provide those educational pieces of what this different psychoactive, you know, properties and experiences that you're going through may have or may not have, and how can you counteract it to be able to navigate that conversation.
Does it worry you a little bit about, the future of cannabis where, you know, I'm not wishing this, but like the nightmare scenario of where a big corporation takes over cannabis and the cannabis or what people are mostly exposed to is kind of like a not so good product of cannabis, right? There's like preservatives and stuff, all that kind of stuff in there. So do you worry about that of about like, big corporations taking over cannabis, and like does that make you feel like, I have a sense of urgency because I want to educate people on like what good cannabis is before, the big evil corporations get their paws on it? Does that worry you or give you any sense of urgency?
Yeah, in a way, if you and the way you pose it like
Mhm.
that, yeah, absolutely, right? Because yeah, I'm sure they're gonna try to, you know, get the best bang for their buck and cut
Mhm.
corners if
Mhm.
possible to try to create their margins and whatnot, right? So for sure, if we can definitely try to start educating folks now about what are the things that you're looking for, and it would even help now with just the business that are actually in place now, right? Because what's going on now is that there's this misconception of THC percentages out
Mhm.
there right now, right? And the higher the THC, the better quality flower you're receiving, when that's really not the case, right? You want to look at like the terpene profiles and like what experience are you looking for with the plant, or why is it that you're going for, towards the plant that will help navigate like that experience. And so if you have a better understanding of what it is, what's your end goal with the plant, then it'll help that whole conversation in general.
So you think there's kind of like a loss in like a meaningfulness in why people kind of use the plant right now? It's kind of like this is a lot of THC, so it's going to get me really high, and you think that's kind of dominating the industry a little bit right now?
It is dominating the industry. It is, and it's becoming problems for everyone, especially for the smaller companies and the smaller brands that um, that maybe has to source the flower, right? Because if you don't have a farm, then you're purchasing from the flower from the farm, right? And if shops know that consumers are only coming in to purchase the high THC flower, then that just that it trickles down to like now it's forcing farms to
Only grow that.
only grow like high THC flower and try to manipulate the plant and try to manipulate certain things to be able to reach that percentage, right? Instead of really focusing on like creating a medicinal plant, it's changing the entire game with all of that. So now I purchase a flower and it comes out at like I don't know 22%. I know that a shop may not buy it, and I just spent a couple thousand of thousands of dollars
Mhm.
to produce this product, and there's a lot of money that goes behind that, right? Like it's not just purchasing the flower, you're purchasing the jar or the bag that you're putting it in. You're paying for the labeling that goes along with it. You're also paying for testing. Testing needs to be done too, right? And that's where these percentages are being drawn up from. It's from the lab test that's required to happen before it even gets sold, right? So you're putting all of this money before you're stepping into a shop, and then for a shop to then say we're not going to buy that because it doesn't meet our standards, it creates problems for the
Mm.
smaller brands, right? Because now they just spent a lot of their life savings, maybe especially someone that's maybe just starting off, right? They just spent thousands of dollars to obtain a license. They just spent thousands of dollars of trying to market their brand and create this buzz to then get stopped by a shop because consumers are only looking to buy 30%.
Mm. Are there any brands that you know right now that are kind of focusing on that approach? Not the approach of higher THC, but creating an experience, creating a medicinal plant, creating
Yeah, there's tons of brands out there, but unfortunately the market is what's driving
Mm,
the
That's
everything.
interesting.
Yeah.
that is
What
really interesting.
do you know if there's any negative effects of like higher THC in terms of like when it comes to brain health and stuff like that?
No, I don't know like any statistics or science behind it, so I don't want to
No, I
like.
feel you.
Mhm.
I was just wondering because I know people always talk about that it seems like weed now, it's like THCs only get bigger, and I'm wondering if like that in any way is like has like its down effects, like its cons.
Well, I've heard that. Don't quote me on it. But I've heard that it's kind of becoming more agreed that it's not so good for people who have obviously, mental health issues,
Mhm.
and people are saying that there might be a correlation between, you know, increased cannabis use and certain mental health disorders. I don't know the facts, the statistics, or like the people to quote on that. But that's I was gonna ask you a little bit about that, but you said you didn't really
Yeah.
know about that yet. But
And that's the other part though too, right? Is because it's still federally illegal,
Mhm.
Oh
there
yeah.
isn't that many studies out there,
Yeah.
or there it we can't conduct
Yeah.
those studies, right? So that's another conversation that needs to be had
Mhm.
and needs to be brought up
Yeah.
to deschedule the plant to be
Mhm.
able to study the plant,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
And that's something that I've had discussions with some of our guests in our first season is there's that fight also going on to deschedule it to be able to have
Yeah.
these tests and
Yeah.
create these studies.
Yeah, because I have heard a lot about that. Like on drugs specifically, like that they should be at least like legalized because there would be more study and more care, especially like with not just weed but with other drugs.
Yeah.
Like there, you would know the effects and like the long term effects. Because it's the same thing with weed. Like we don't know the long term effects because of how long it's been illegal. Like we haven't had those tests and everything. So it's interesting to see that too.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's definitely a more dangerous aspect when it comes to inhaling weed when it comes to carts, like cartridges, in terms of wax pens? Because I know a lot of people have complained about pesticides and that, like, especially in states where it's a lot harder to get weed, that sometimes wax pens are like not even THC, but mainly like I forgot what it's called, synthetics, I think. What do you think about that?
So when we're looking at the pesticides and things like that, and one thing that stands out to me immediately is that it's a quote unquote black market item, right? Because it isn't. Everything that's legally out there, like I mentioned earlier, needs to be tested, and then they test for those things, right? They test for like heavy metals and pesticides and mold and all these different things of the flower before it even gets pushed out. So
Mhm.
for one, if there's those complaints, then that means that that's what's going on. That now, obviously, these tests aren't happening in those states that um, are not legal yet. So yeah, I could definitely see it happening. Um, and then it just goes back to the manufacturing side of things, and it goes back to like what was the process that was that was um, that was done, I guess, to be able to produce this product, produce that vape pen. And so then it kind of goes back to like trusting if you're in a state that isn't legal, then it goes back to like trusting who made that product, right? Do you trust like how they planted the product, and then because it all starts from the jump, right? From when it was grown, and then it all kind of cycles through. So it goes back to like those conversations and those aspects of things. But
Mm.
here in the state, like here in California, um, if you want to go the safest route, like you want to go to one of those licensed dispensaries to be able to like, and you can ask for like the certificate. It's called a certificate of analysis, a COA, which are the test results. You can always go in and ask for test results even before buying them, before purchasing a product. If you go in there and say, "Okay, may I see the COAs for this product?" Sometimes they'll even like have them there for you. So, I mean, you can definitely do your research before purchasing something, and make that conscious decision before you start to ingest or consume whatever product you're going to be consuming.
Wow.
This is kind of like three questions in one. Um, there's obviously the stigma about how we just kind of came off of the everybody smoking cigarettes, and we know all the bad outcomes of that, lung cancer and stuff like that. So obviously that slightly carries over because you're inhaling, you're smoking. There's
Yeah.
a lot of people who smoke. That's how they consume their cannabis. So my questions to you are like, for the average Joe who's just, they're not really looking for it as a medicinal way. They're just trying to they want to participate
Yeah.
in consuming. What do you think is the best, safest, way to consume cannabis for someone who's a little bit, afraid, or who's like, just for someone to get into it, who's like, I'm worried about my health. What do you think is like the best way to get in?
Yeah.
What is your personal favorites?
So like I said, it goes back to why you're turning to the plant, right? First and foremost, why are you turning to it? If you're turning to it for aches and pains, are you turning to it because you want to just de-stress? Like all those different um experiences that you want to have plays a role, right? For me personally, I got a bunch of aches and pains, right? So I use, depending on like what I'm trying to soothe, like if I have pain on my back, then I'll use maybe an oil or a lotion, a topical lotion that's infused with CBD, and that helps, right? That definitely helps, and you don't feel no, you don't feel the psychoactive properties of that, because
Mhm.
THC in itself is an anti-inflammatory property,
Yeah.
right? So if you have inflammation in a joint and you rub the oil on there, then it'll help that inflammation out, right? And you're not feeling those psychoactive pieces. I used to smoke a lot of the flower, but then with my most recent child, with the baby, I personally don't like to have that smoky, ashy residue on like left on my shirt or
Mhm.
on my beard or whatever. So then I turned myself into edibles, and I started taking more edibles so that I don't have to I don't have that residue left on me. Um and so I got really big on edibles for a while. And and when I first got into the edibles, I was a little scared because I've had those edibles that have taken me way over the top in the past. And
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone that's had tried those homemade, quote unquote, homemade brownies, right, has had those negative experiences.
Yeah.
So going into it myself, that I've smoked, like, and everyone has a different everyone has different experiences, right? And everyone
Mhm.
feels things differently.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was scared to take on those edibles. So what I did was, one, I did research, right? I looked up different videos. I asked different people for some knowledge,
Mhm.
right? And one of the constant that I heard was start slow and low with edibles. So I went as low as possible, and I started with a 2.5 milligram like mint, and allowed that to run its course. Because the problem with edibles that people run into is, one, it sometimes they taste really good and you want to keep going, right?
Yeah.
And so then, and you don't know, like, if it's a homemade, you don't know how much is in there. But
Mhm.
if you know how much it's in there, one, it's really good. And then with everybody, like with everyone, the experience is different in how you're ingesting it.
Mhm.
So it may take anywhere from 30 minutes, 5 minutes, an hour, maybe even 2 hours for you to actually feel the effects of an edible.
Mhm.
Where you might think like, oh, that was shit, and then
The
I
classic.
take another
The
one,
classic.
right? And then it hits you. And so those were definitely one of the things. Like I took the 2.5 for the
Mhm.
night and saw what I felt. And if I felt something and I liked it, then cool. I stayed there. If I
Mm.
didn't like it, if I feel like I could take on more, I cool. Then the next day, I took 5 milligrams, see how that felt, and then I was like, oh, all right, cool. I like this five feeling. I'm gonna stay right there. And just for shits and giggles, I was like, you know, what, let me do 10 to see, just to make sure, right? And it was on a night where like I know I'm gonna stay home and shit,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And that tent slammed the shit out of me. I was like, okay, cool. Let me bring it back. And now I know five is my number. 45 is that's my magic number
Mm.
there. And that's kind of how I decided to take it. So then I knew that, and by doing that too, like I knew that okay, cool, it takes about 45 minutes to hit
Mhm.
me,
Yeah.
right? So I'm putting my daughter down at about, I don't know, let's say 10 o'clock. I'm popping my edible at about 9:30, so that by the time my daughter knocks out at 10, cool. 15 minutes later, I know I'm gonna start to feel it and be able to relax. And I don't see it any different than someone who like takes a glass of wine at the end of the night, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
To wind down and
Mhm.
calm themselves down. Like, that's how I take it. And then I got turned on the drinks.
Mhm.
And how are
Uh,
those? I've actually never tried
I've never
them.
had them either.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me neither.
I never have either until recently. And so they with the drinks, they got I've seen like the 100 milligram drinks, and then just recently I just seen like a 10 milligram drink, and I was like, ooh, because the 100 milligram drinks, it's like they're like shots, right? Like, and it'll tell you like, all right, if you take this amount, it serves as 10 milligrams, but it's essentially like taking a shot, and with the drink, the 10 milligram drink, I knew that by drinking the entire drink, I'm only gonna consume 10 milligrams.
Oh, okay.
So I know 10 milligrams is my magic number now, right? And so as I'm sipping it, like it, I take longer to take the drink, right? Like,
Mhm.
I don't know, about 30 minutes to finish sipping on the drink at the end of the day. So that by 15 minutes after I'm done with that drink, I'm starting to feel the effects of like sip number one, which isn't a lot, right? It isn't a lot of milligrams that I'm taking. So like that wave that I'm feeling isn't never gets to a high level. It kind of just keeps me grounded as long as I didn't pound that drink, because I did that. Like there's like maybe a little bit left towards the end. There was like a little bit left, and I just like, let me finish this real quick.
Yeah.
And sure enough, like it that high stayed pretty steady up until like the end of it, where like it kind of like went up a bit. Like I felt that spike. I was like, all right, this is that last bit that I just but you can but with that, like understanding that, you can now control your experience, and you can
Mhm.
control what you want to feel. And that's, if for someone, going back to that question, for someone that wants to try it, me personally, I went that route. But I personally like those edibles because I feel like I can control that high or that experience. Whereas when you smoke, you don't really know how much you're intaking when you take that puff,
Mm.
right? And it hits you faster than an edible does because it's already there.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the end of the day, you can't really control how much you're ingesting or consuming. Whereas an edible, like, you have that control. And I like to have that, at least know where I'm going. At least, depending on the
Mhm.
situation. And there's
So-
sometimes I just don't give a fuck. I'm like, all right, cool.
So you're saying that like
We all
so
have
an
to-
edible is better to start off than actually smoking it?
That I'm saying that works for me.
Okay.
Because I was gonna
That
say,
works for
like,
me.
I feel like for me it's the opposite. I feel like I when I'm smoking, I'm like, okay, I think I'm pretty high. I'm gonna stop smoking. But an edible, like, I feel like if I take an edible and it just starts me already like at a high,
Yeah,
and
and I was speaking to that with my partner Julia about that too. Like with an edible, like I'm taking the 10 milligrams, I'm taking that shit in like one chingazo, like, right? Like when it hits, it hits.
Yeah.
And but with that one drink, because I'm
It's
sipping on
coasting,
it,
right?
I just coast throughout that
really,
experience.
so
Interesting.
the drink hits you like immediately or like
No, it still takes like that 30, like 45 minutes to
Mhm.
affect. But by the time I'm done drinking that bottle, like it's already gone maybe 30 minutes. So
Mm.
15 minutes later, I'm starting to feel that effect of that first sip.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So because you're not drinking the whole drink at once, you're drinking it a little bit at a time.
Exactly.
You're getting the high as you were drinking. It's paced, right?
Yeah.
So, hey,
I
Right.
gotta try it out. I
It's a
gotta try
paced
it out.
edible.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
really
That's
cool.
interesting.
Yeah, I've never.
And I just recently found out like last week.
What's
On Friday.
What's your
Uh,
go-to drink, or what's the drink that you liked?
Yeah, what was it called?
The fizz. It's called the Fizz. Yeah,
Oh,
the
so
Fizz.
The Fizz.
B Rami also mentioned
Yeah.
the
Thank you for
fizz.
commenting.
Yeah.
Shout
Thank you for
out.
coming.
Um,
And they also said microdose.
Yeah. So the Fizz. I just started. I just on Friday when I was here Friday night with Jackie and the ladies' night show.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, that was the first time that I had a drink. Because before that, I was always taking the 10 milligram
the
shot.
shot.
How's that? Is that a lot like a regular edible, or is it
Yeah.
a little harder?
Not the same.
Is it like soda or like juice or something? Like, what is it?
Which one?
Either. I don't. I've never
There.
even.
It just depends. Like there's like that Fizz. It's like a sparkling water.
Mm.
If you're like a
Mm.
fan of sparkling water, it's good.
Well,
Try it. I just cleaned them out at Green Thumb, so it might be a while.
Dr. Green Thumb.
Dr. Green Thumb in LA. That's where you can find the Fizz.
Really?
Oh.
That's like by our house too.
Oh, you guys live right there in Northeast
Yeah.
LA?
Northeast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's our set. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that's
your
our
set
set.
right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter lives right by there on Riverside Drive.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
Yeah, she went to
Wow.
Alessandro Elementary. She
Wow.
goes to Irving Middle School.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Wow,
Did you guys
small
go there?
world.
No, but we live around there.
Yeah.
You guys live in that
Yeah.
area?
Yeah. Yeah, we live around there.
Well, it looks like we're just about out of time. But before we go, Danny, I want to give you a chance to go ahead and promote your show and let the people know what you're up to.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we'll be here at the TGN Latinx station starting this Monday. This Monday.
Hey.
This Monday, you can find us here at 4:20 p.m. every Monday. Download the app, YouTube, get our channel.
Hell yeah. Go
Y'all
ahead.
That was this was a very informative podcast.
Yeah, it
I really
was.
learned a lot. But yeah, check out Said Connects on Mondays. Danny's a great guy.
Mhm.
I'm sure he's going to teach you guys a lot more than you guys learned on today, even though you learned a lot today, I'm sure too. But definitely check him out. He's
I
a great
learned
friend
a
of the
lot.
show.
I learned a lot.
Grateful. Very
Yeah.
grateful, Danny.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah,
the
for
knowledge.
sure.
Come back on the show, or we'll come back on.
Yeah,
yours,
yeah, we'll definitely have you guys on our show, and I'll be back anytime you guys want.
Yeah,
Say less.
absolutely. All right, folks. We'll see you next week, and have a good weekend.
Remember, you guys.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
Today we did a
See y'all
little
next
learning,
time.
though.
Yeah. I'll change it. All right. Bye.
Bye.
guys.
See you guys.
Oh, now YouTube gets the special content.
Yeah, YouTube always gets like a few.
They
more
get a
minutes.
they get a little
Yeah.
extra.
Hi, YouTube.
Hi YouTube, what's going on?
Oh, right there, right. We're looking.
Yeah.
Look at the screen. We should be looking there.
I remember we're always.
Oh, we always fake talk.
Yeah.
Oh, Jackie had commented. She's like, that drink got me an hour
Hour
after my Friday show.
It's
I
because we
drank
can't
it.
look at all of them.
But it was nice. Shout out to Jackie.
Shout out to Mysterious Jax.
The big box.
Oh, ladies'
Oh,
night.
ladies'
night.
Wow,
Thanks for
bye.
coming.
You see, this is the extra content you two get.
Even we get extra content.
All right,
All right,
we'll see you
guys.
out
We'll
next
see y'all.
time. Bye.
Bye.